on vacation and you want to take 20 books with you, how many people take a Kindle instead? So we're going back and forth with this, and I'm just going to try to raise some of the issues. Our challenges: literature entries have dropped sharply. Literature competitions have become a difficult financial burden. There's been some confusion on what can be entered in literature competitions. And in fact, some of the judges I've talked to said we shouldn't even be talking about literature competitions anymore. Maybe the word literature is too confining. Maybe it should be just philatelic publications and published in the broadest sense of just disseminating information in whatever form. And there's really been no formal training on judging with the new forms. So how do we take that a little further? Well, the background is that 45 years, literature competitions went from 1, which was Chicago Peck's, up to 6 a year. 3 have ceased operations. Middlefield used to be the only one that had a competition for articles and columns. And it was a wonderful venue. Tremendous material would come in there each year. And a lot of these were people who were getting in on the ground floor of writing. And it was excellent to be able to give them some assistance, but the show ran up on hard times, and that entire venue closed, and it never reopened elsewhere. And now we have no place to judge and assist the beginning author. Sescal lost Bob Duvalini, and Lois couldn't find help to continue the competition. So that ended, and Kolopex couldn't afford the losses. So we're down to 3 now, and we don't want to lose them. We want to actually build up some more. Now, NAPEX in 2012 had revenues of $650. Their expenses were in excess of $3,000. Now that's because NAPEX is extremely generous. They not only give the judges a $500 stipend, they also give them rooms at the show and the tickets and all this stuff. It really adds up. Ken Martin can tell you if you want to talk to him about the revenues and expenses for the APS, but the numbers are appropriately ugly. It's just that with a big, big show, you have a little more from which you can absorb. Chicago Peck's had revenues of $730 and direct costs in excess of $1,500. We don't give free rooms, but we do give $350 per judge. And the other $450 was tickets and things of that nature. And that doesn't count any postage of mailing the books or any awards or any of that nonsense. We just absorb that. So initial efforts have been made. There's been some revision of Chapter 23A of the manual, and I probably already raised enough issues of why 23A wasn't a great choice. At some point, we hope literature has its own little section. And Canage did a very quick revision for use in Chicago Peck 2011, which worked. And it went outside his membership to ask John Hotchner to do some more revisions, mostly to soften the tone, not to expand the chapter to judge more aspects of literature. And digital media have barely been addressed in our whole concept of judging literature or publications. So we're left with physical media being judged and a little aspect of digital media which is hardly touched upon. They're mentioned as CDs. Well, CDs are almost dead. Not quite. But you went from the 8-track to the cassette to the CD, and now pretty much you're into DVDs and other forms of storage, and yet we're talking CDs. So for discussion today, I hope we can talk about exploring new venues and methods of literature judging. Maybe somewhere down the line we can try judging via email, especially for digital media, but even for printed matter. We can still scan it into a PDF, email it, and judge it. You can post it in several different forms. Picasa works well. There's one called Dropbox, I believe. If you have a Hotmail account or something like that, you've got a way to upload it to your SkyDrive and anybody can share it. So judges could collaborate at their convenience over a period of time. And you could have something that takes place without any particular venue, just completely in what they used to call the ether. Maybe some show that is struggling financially would ask for a buy every other year. Just hold the competition once every 2 years. Or maybe hold one in conjunction with a major society or convention. And in that case, maybe include the language or languages of that society, making sure you had judges who were able to read those languages. And maybe we can do some learning from foreign competitions, like the huge one they had in Germany. This one in IFLA, those of you who may or may not be aware of it, I've put the website in here. Anybody who wants a copy of this little PowerPoint can have it. You can get it in English or in German. They had 573 entries, which just is an awesome number of entries when you think about how we struggle to get 30, 40, 50, and we've never had 100 except in the international. They had 7 jury class entries in that. 103 entries were in digital classes, both interactive, 67, and non-interactive, 36. And they had 91 entries with printed catalogs, which for a while we were looking at with a little disdain, and now we're again treating as if they're members of the human race again or something like that. And we now have access to the results and all the pluses and minuses of their 12-page judging entry regulations. So at some point, if we want to make a proposal to the board, if Canage wants to do some revision of how we're handling literature, we can draw upon that information. And the people there are quite willing to share everything that went right and all the things that went wrong too. They're quite open about that. Now we also have training and input opportunities. One would be beyond just an open discussion like this, which will be very open in just a couple of minutes, is to provide some seminar training for people, and I'm still referring as literature judges, but these could be just as easily publication judges. Explain how the LEEF form is to be used in conjunction with the new regulations. I happen to be chief for 2 of the first 3 shows that used it and found them a little confusing at times, and John did a trifecta and can tell you that he's struggled with some of the terminology too. So we really need to get a better understanding of what the words that we're telling ourselves we're using really mean. We need to open a dialogue with authors, editors, and publishers about the new judging forms and standards. Now, Canage did a wonderful job, 2 to 3 years in developing and testing the UEF and the new regulations for philatelic exhibiting, and there was a couple of years then of training and seminars for judges. And I remember before that even started, Tim Barchi had come up to me with a copy of the UEF and said, we're going to be rolling this out in about a year. Why don't you just start using it as you go around and judge and give me some feedback on it? And I wasn't the only person that he did that with, just so that he got people to say, oh, I'm having trouble with this, what did you mean by that, and so forth. And then we had 2 years where judges could attend the seminars that were open also to exhibitors, supported by AEP and open meetings. So everybody was on the same page, and I think we need that same kind of support now for literature. We can also talk about expanding the field. What categories of material that we as judges are permitted to judge? Catalogs are a starting point for people who are seeking knowledge, for most collectors, and this is now done. For a while, the wording was so tough that hardly any catalog could compete. Now they're competing pretty successfully. At Chicago PEX, the Siegel firm put in auction catalogs and did quite well. But they were not only exceptional auction catalogs, They were backed by an exceptional website with a whole lot of research that you could do. So they not only put all of their census work into the catalogs, but you could go to their website and find a comparable for any single item for the last 20 or more years of the Siegel firm and see every example that had come up and the condition and what it had sold for and how it was described, what the provenance was, and so on. Incredible tools. Articles and columns were once judged on their own. They were now anathema, but by what reasoning? They're analogous to one-framers. We don't ask a one-frame exhibit to compete against a 10-framer. We need not ask a column or an article to compete against a handbook, but certainly we can find a way to discuss the merits and the problems with an article. We may not be the subject matter expert that the person who wrote the article was, but we're also not the subject matter expert for the person who did the one-framer, and yet we still find a way to judge it. We still find a way to evaluate how well they defined what they were going to do, and then how well they executed. And we did have time to do research. And with literature, we have far more time to do that research. We can do it at our leisure. We can go to libraries, we can research on the internet. So there are many ways we can prepare ourselves to help people with articles and columns. CDs are now judged, but with limited understanding and insight, and there's no mention of purely digital media. We have a gentleman, Larry Fillion. Larry, would you just stand up for a moment? Because if people have questions about how to handle the digital portion of literature, Larry's a wonderful resource. He and a colleague have developed a website for stamps and all things relating to malaria. The caches, cancels, you name it. And he entered it in Chicago Pass. Well, it's a website, but he took the time to freeze the website onto a CD and submit it as a CD so the judges could work right with the CD, didn't have to have connectivity to go on and work with it. But that turned a dynamic and interactive media into a static one. But that's the way we were allowed to judge it, so that's what he had to do. Submit it as a CD. He didn't even submit it as a DVD because the language doesn't provide for a DVD. Even though we've ignored it from time to time, literally the language by which we judge literature doesn't include DVDs, only CDs. Websites are not judged now, and they must be in the future. They're hard to judge because they change, and they must be judged because they can change. The FIP gave up. Well, there's some good literature judges at the FIP, and there's some real hacks. And frankly, they gave up. They gave up too quickly. Now here's a little candid candidate. What's the future? Tough question. We can only safely say it'll be different. Do we really need to overhaul or rebuild the road we're already on? Or might we be better served by choosing a new path? As it stands, we're constantly evaluating what is past with the hope that our observations will be incorporated into hopefully better products. This has us consistently looking back rather than forward. Perhaps our efforts in the literature arena, printed and digital, should be directed to the future right now. A comprehensive program aimed at educating our writers, editors, producers, and also the judges could make huge strides in opening new horizons and assisting the technologically challenged, usually older players like me, how to get ahead and in the new games. Now, this isn't me speaking, this is Jim Brown. This is Jim Brown, who wrote, edited a lot of the regulations that were so tight and restrictive just a couple of years ago. Jim and I had some long conversations, and he's saying, damn it, I think we need to look ahead. That's a hell of a 180 for a wonderful gentleman. And I think part of the problem, at least according to Jim, is that he was awfully fuzzy with the medication that he was taking for his Parkinson's. And he said, I can put up with this rather than put up with that. Okay, he was so fuzzy. Now he is really sharp, and he's saying, let's go digital. A very interesting change. And here's some ways we can move forward. We can recognize limitations of what we do now. We currently have almost no way of helping the producers of a handbook or a specialized catalog. We can give an award, pat on the back. Then they go away, and with luck, a revised edition may appear in 10, 20, or 50 years. Meanwhile, no new information is added, and old mistakes take on a life that is almost as eternal as a government program. Embracing the digital world is the only way we currently have of changing this. For periodicals, we can do a bit more. Years ago, part of our job involved checking that all the essentials were there. Masthead, table of contents, contacts for officers, editor, annual index, etc. Desktop publishing allows us to focus on articles and services. Okay? So, digital has already automated virtually every single periodical out there. All the things that we used to have to question, has the editor done this and so on, they're in there. One time, one and done. Now, the focus is really on content. But by the time we judge the 2011 publication, we're well into 2012, and changes may happen in 2013. So with an effort to use every aspect of digital technology, we can make feedback more relevant and timely, and publications can correct and improve as they go along. One example would be, let's say you have a quarterly publication. By the time you get your current news to the members, it's already old news. If you have a monthly, you're a little bit more on time. But what if your group has a website, which the vast majority of them do now? All you need to do is publish in your journal a link to whatever events are current that you want the members to be able to access. Or put a little QR code, a quick response code in there, and they can just scan it. And instantly they're taken to the website where all that information is. There you can hear who's exhibited, what awards they got, who's judged at what shows, what auctions are coming up, what were realizations of the prices. You can see your own club auctions. All of the things that used to cost a lot of time and money to put on the paper, you can all have them on the website, and they can be updated regularly as long as you have a good volunteer. Now, I can define a good volunteer for you very easily by pointing at Larry. And I'll tell you why. When he puts together a literature exhibit, his kids wind up getting silvers, vermeils, golds, and he winds up getting silver bronze. Why? Because his stuff always comes last, and he's always helping everybody else with their stuff. But when his catalog comes in, just a catalog on malaria, they wind up getting a vermeil, because he's doing all the volunteer work to keep that stuff up to date. So you can really see how easily to judge how certain people are doing their volunteer. All their own stuff is suffering, and everything else is getting taken care of. Except for people like John, because John doesn't sleep, he just thinks a lot. That's the only way he keeps going. Now, how can digital media enhance printed media? And this is something I think we need to deal with for the next several years as digital media eventually completely supplant almost all forms of printed media. A specialized handbook on an issue of stamps can be supplemented by a DVD that contains scans of several major collections of the issue, from traditional to postal historical approaches. A study on tagging can contain a video showing the various taggants and papers under different wavelengths. These are just examples. Census information can be included on a spreadsheet format with links to a supporting website that contains standardized reporting forms for submitting new discoveries, which, after proper vetting, are then included in the updated census. Some of you may remember in 1986, the 1869 PRA came out with a book like this, a census of all 1869 covers from 6-cent denominations upwards. That was a magnum opus that Mike Lawrence pushed through with a lot of the members of the group. Well, recently, Mike published his book through the Collectors Club of Chicago on the 10-cent. Well, in those intervening years, the number of 10-cent covers on his census had increased by over 20%. And he was kind enough to share his census records with me. We have a sample of how he maintained them. John Barrow shared his, a few other people have shared theirs, and they're all now in the possession of Ken Martin, where we're going to try to develop 2 templates. One that would be mostly applicable to postal history, one that would be mostly applicable to stamps and multiples and so forth. So that any person who wants to do census work can just ask for a template. And they then can customize that template more or less to what they want to do. But at least we have a starting point so that people aren't always reinventing the wheel. Websites are the future. They're constantly evolving. Today, accordingly, a periodical can offer very few timely services. By the time the publication is received, it's 4 months out of date. We covered a little list of websites that tightly integrated with the periodical can feed members all the news they want. Local meetings, talks at upcoming shows, auctions of specialist materials, and so on. They can also be done so they have push technology, automated emails as soon as information hits the web. Years ago, I used to talk to Ken about using the emails to publicize stuff. Oh, no, we don't have explicit permission to do that, and some people complain if we use emails and so forth. That was an attitude 12, 15 years ago. Well, it's changed. Steve was very gracious to say, yes, let's get some publicity out on this. I wrote a little release. Steve said, fine. We got it to Ken. 2,000 people received an email a week before the show, so at least a variety of people could show up here. This is the kind of technology we need to implement. It's expensive to mail something to 2,000 people and to get them to open it and so on. A handful of keystrokes and 2,000 people hear about something that they have potential interest in. We don't have the funding to do big mass mail campaigns and to reach out and call people and so on. But email is the holy grail of every marketing organization. And we need to leverage our emails to the greatest effect that we can. We cannot afford a 19th century mentality in the 21st century world any more than we could have rejected movable type in favor of illuminated manuscripts in the 15th century. Now, analyzing a website. I've heard all sorts of stuff about why you can't do it, and I'd like to propose a few things that will make it a whole lot easier. A website can be viewed as being constructed of 3 components. The first is static. That's the backbone of the site, composed of the home page, pull-down menus, and navigational aids. This is a portion of a website that changes little, if at all, until a major upgrade or revision of the site. The Google search bar is a prime example of a static component. You go onto the Google homepage, and all you see is whatever they played with today to make the Google logo look funny, and then this big blank search bar, and that's it. That's the nuts and bolts of the static part of their website. Everything else becomes interactive and dynamic later on. But you can understand the Google as the plainest possible static portion of a website. If you go to our APS website, the home page with this new upgrade looks pretty much the same. They have 2 or 3 little banners changing in the corner. You may have a little announcement here, but you know how all the navigational tools work, and once you've clicked through them, that's all the same. That's static. So once you go to judge it, you've looked at the static part, you don't have to worry about that again. You just now have to look at the other 2 components of a website. One is dynamic. That's the portion of the site that is changed often without any input from the viewer. The daily news stories on MSN.com are clearly dynamic content. That's the stuff that's changing regularly that they want you to see. But then there's the interactive part, which is the portion of the site which changes in direct response to the visitor to the site. eBay bidding on lots is classically interactive. But there are other ways that a site interacts with you that you may not even know. Cookies that are on your hard drive. You click onto that site, they read the cookies that are stored, and they present contact and ads to you. You may not know why you're getting those ads, but having followed you around the web, they know enough about you that they think you're more likely to respond to this ad than some other. Targeted marketing. In other ways, you can block that and so on if you don't like it, but this is the interactive part of the web. When we are judging a website as judges, if we ever get to the point where we're permitted to experiment with that and do it, it's real simple. We have to analyze the dynamic and the interactive parts of the site. The static, you don't worry about that. That's the stuff that doesn't change. What's important is what does change. Somebody publishes a handbook. How well are they supporting that handbook? That goes to the credit to the website when you're judging that website. Are they regularly updating things? If you go back and check half a dozen areas of that site over, let's say, a 3-week period, and they don't change any of that stuff, then the website isn't really that good a site. They aren't doing anything to maintain. They aren't doing anything to push things ahead. Whereas if you go in there and you see that there's, since the last time you looked at the site, there's 4 new additions to the census, there's a correction of something on a certain page, there's a handful of announcements of things that are going on, there's several requests for assist for research. One of the most important interactive sites out there right now is the Vergara message board. There are so many things that are going on there, not just in terms of postal history, but a lot of it is focused on there, but you can go on that site, and I click through on it 3 or 4 times a day, just to see who's asking what questions, and is there something of interest. Well, somebody was starting to discuss about registration fees, and they're arguing back and forth, and one guy came up with a beautiful table that laid out all of the domestic and the foreign registration fees during a time period of particular interest to me. One click, and I save that image to my hard drive, and boom, I don't have to deal with that issue again ever. It's there. You can suck stuff off the web all the time from some of these really good interactive sites. We just need to learn how to deal with them. A note of caution. If the scope of philatelic literature is to be expanded to the degree Drew set forth, a concerted effort must first be made to script play and then try it in practice to see how well it all works. Okay? Now, I've gotten that caution from Steve a few times, so I'm taking it to heart. It's right up here. But this one came from Jim Brown. The process will allow for correction of points that come to light under the law of unintended consequences, just as they did for catalogs in 2010, and provide a solid basis for a revision that is fully proven, knowing up front that it must be flexible enough to adapt and to encompass the changes that are sure to come in our ever-accelerating digital age. At that point, one can undertake the re-education of the judges. Okay? So, opportunities and cautions. Thank you. Let's just open it up to all the questions and comments anybody has. And if you don't mind, I'm going to just, oh yeah, I like fishing. That's, it's not my largest, but it's a good sized fish. Or maybe people think I'm a good sized fish, but that's another point. Anyway, John, you've got lots of comments, I'm sure. Other people have questions?
I don't have lots of comments, but I would like to say, so the committee that's been set up is your agent. It isn't here to function on its own. And we want to know what you want, what you need, and hopefully to fold all of that into a plan of action, as Rich outlined. Rich has done a rather long article which will be in the next issue of TPE. We need you to read it, react to it. And then I'd just like to highlight the fact that there's an overarching reason for doing all of this. And it is that we need to be encouraging philately to use the digital media that are available and will become available. Why? Because that's where the potential members of our societies are, and indeed our new collectors. And we need to be out there where they are. And so that's the underlying thought behind all of this. Comments, questions, ideas?
Yeah, one basic question to start out. Why a competition, or is that even the best term? I would operate under the premise that literature, whatever we mean by that, electronic, printed, or whatever, is far more important to the long-term success of the hobby than philatelic competitions like are on the floor there. The literature represents the knowledge, the total body of the knowledge of the hobby if it's stored properly. The exhibits I prepare are fleeting in nature.
Okay.
So why a even competition? Is that the right word? Or
Well,
to reward people, pat them on the back? I don't think most authors like to get patted on the back.
there are some people who like to be patted on the back so much that they will even pay for their own awards just so they can get them. Okay? That's one aspect of human nature. And I can cite that as knowing someone who actually paid to have a ring designed for the champion of champions just so he could wear one. I mean, they're
Probably in the minority, though.
Okay.
Maybe a wealthy minority, but
all right, but frankly, there are groups who every single competition they enter, every single time, and they want that recognition. When I was a member of the Lundy Collectors Club Beer Drinking and Pizza Eating Society, we had a little journal, and Roger Chehorst took care of that from Colorado, and he regularly got silver bronzes, which was about what the publication merited. But he entered every single year because he wanted then to be able to publish in the journal that Lundy was still out there competing and being recognized along with the big boys and so forth. There are people who like to get just a thank you or a pat on the back. Whether it improves things overall, I don't know. Mike Lawrence is of the opinion that literature competitions are ultimately just silly. So he doesn't enter them. And yet when we published his book, we as the Collectors Club entered it and won grands and gold and all. So, and he was perfectly happy to receive them, just not to have been seen entering. So, yeah, and he loved the pat on the back, and then he was also very happy to share all the research he'd done. So, call it a forum, call it a workshop, call it whatever you want, but if we can get people together to improve our hobby, that's a plus. Pat?
Yeah, well, along those lines, I was just thinking, if you call it a forum, so let's talk about websites. So the different groups could improve their websites by, you know, entering them where people look at them and say, this is good, this is bad. How many groups would we get to do that? Versus if it is a competition with prizes, and I can tell you, you'll get more if it's a competition with prizes.
That's why
The forum will get some forward people who really want to improve, and yeah, they'll play. And then they'll get it to where, and then they'll sort of stop. But let me tell you, competition's just, people are competitive.
Yeah.
And if you know, especially, I love your Lundy example, especially if a society that is a specialized group or something that's fairly, say, small and obscure compared to, like you said, the big boys. Mm-hmm. But if their website is dynamic and interactive and attractive and all this stuff, and if they can do just as well as the Scandinavian Collectors Club or the U.S. Classic, say, let me tell you, they're going to be so pleased. And that competition will do that.
Yeah, we just started a new website at the Collectors Club. When I say just started, I mean it's maybe 20, 25% implemented. We got a silver bronze, we entered it in IFLA. But it beat the GPS that got a bronze. Because at least we had done a few more forward-looking, forward-thinking things and show some promise.
And the other thing I think would happen is, exactly that, is, hey, this little website, you know, hey, they want a Vermeil, and we ought to be able to do better than that. I mean, people are going to pay attention to what's good and copy it.
Yeah. Well, the Collectors Club of New York has done something which I think is extremely important. They are now documenting each of the talks that are given at the club. And they're going to have them on the website and so forth. And I think that's extremely valuable for years to come. When you get someone who presents something and has an opportunity to speak about certain little areas that maybe they never wrote about, but somebody raised a question and a very insightful comment comes up. This is the kind of stuff we want to preserve and share. Everybody who talks at the Collectors Club of Chicago, when we get the features fully implemented, we want them to have the opportunity to save their PowerPoint presentation, to be able to, in some way, record what they do and share that with the rest of the world. We want to give every one of our members the opportunity to share any exhibit that they have and put it up there so other people can look at it. Yes, sir.
I think Philip's question was a good one, and I just want to make sure you think that you've answered it, which I think if you're asking is, do the competitions really provide a service to the hobby or to the science collaborations? So does it have a positive impact on the knowledge base for us?
Yeah, I think they do. I don't think they're the only thing we ought to be doing to encourage literature, but I think that they do encourage authors and editors. And the proof of that is when you see advertising for books. Won a gold medal at. When you see a society editor putting in their journal, we got X award, proving to the membership that this effort is worthwhile. And as Pat said, there's a competitive streak in all of us, and we have to serve that. But is it the only thing that we do to encourage literature? Absolutely not. We're talking about doing seminars, we're talking about person-to-person helping of authors and editors, editing services, lots of things that we could be doing, but not to the exclusion of exhibiting.
I think the point is that we now, in philatelic exhibiting, we now do very well the component of helping exhibitors improve their exhibit. On the other hand, in literature exhibiting, we're doing that we're almost not doing it. And I think what we want to do is bring that component more into literature.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Steve. That's as well as anybody could put it. The handbooks and the periodicals, we can help somewhat. The articles, we can help a whole lot more. And getting people to understand digital media and helping enhance what they're doing. Janet just had to leave, but she's been doing some wonderful stuff on that in her writing. Pat, you're bringing stuff in for helping exhibitors, but it's the same way in literature. The writers unit. I mean, I wish there were more representatives from the writers unit here, but I've gone onto their website recently and found fabulous articles that anybody can just download on how to do different things, how to create hyperlinks and how to work with hypertext markup language and so on. Fran Adams has done a couple of wonderful little articles for them. And this needs to be much more widely disseminated. We as judges need to learn from some of these editors and authors, but at the same time, they're not demanding enough of us, and we don't know to demand enough of them. And we have to find ways of getting this information out to the point where they know what we're looking for and we know what they're capable of, and it starts going back and forth. How many of you know Carlos Vergara, who's an editor of a publication on Chile? Okay, well, yeah, okay. Well, Carlos has been frustrated to the point of being ready to shut down the journal and just walk away. Because there's 80 members and there's about 15 who complain. You know, they want the articles
They won't write them.
the same minute every quarter, and they never write, and they don't have an email address, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and they object to paying the higher postage costs and so on. And the other 65 want color, and they want this and that, and so on and so forth. And we were sitting at the club last week just discussing this. I said, Carlo, you got a real simple answer. You're doing everything now on the computer. Just do it all in color, make it available by email at a certain price. For the ones who have to have it printed, you can either print it or you can send it to them as a PDF, or if they don't have an email, they can pay whatever the postage is. You shouldn't be losing money every month to do it. And if they don't pay to get it, they don't get it. I'm sorry. Dinosaurs are going to die one way or another. You may lose a few members, but if they're not contributing and they're not willing to pay their wage, sorry, forget them. Sorry. But meanwhile, you can take care of all the other people as fancy as you want. And he turns out 24 pages of good stuff. So he's in the process of working that out, where he can give them better quality for less money. And the ones who don't want it, they can either pay for it or not get it. Yeah.
I edit Badger Postal History, and we're lucky enough in Wisconsin to have a federation of stamp clubs, which provides us with a web page. So when I prepare the physical edition of the Badger, which is in black and white, I also make a copy of it in color as PDF, which gets sent to the Federation site, and it's every member of the Wisconsin Postal History Society has a login, so you can get a color version if you want on the web, and then generally 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, the black and white physical edition arrives. I wanted to comment that I have been in a literature competition twice, or once with 2 different publications, and John Hotchner told me in the judge's critique, you know, it would be useful to have some club information in Badger Postal History, and it was like one of those duh moments. I think it's really useful because you can learn things that you haven't done, that the members of your organization would enjoy, and I've been trying to get member information, the occasional picture of a club member, and it was an excellent experience. If you ask me what level award I got, I'm not exactly sure. I think it was silver, but it could have been silver bronze. It wasn't for the award, but just to get somebody who would offer, who had read it and could offer some suggestions is a very useful thing. And I want to make one other little comment. The other journal I edit is the Cinderella Philatelist. And I would the board would like me to enter into literature competitions. What has been difficult is that it's published in the UK, and I make PDFs that I have to send in little chunks that go to a printer I've never seen in my life, and it's distributed by someone in the UK who doesn't have an email address. And organizations are cheap. I can't get 2 copies of the journal that I edit delivered to me in the US. It would make my life so much easier if you just let me send you a PDF. I could send you a PDF that was output for web level, or I could send you a higher quality one that goes to the printer. And it would be cheap. It would be so much cheaper and easier.
Well, right now, people who do put out periodicals that are only done digitally can enter them on CDs. So you may be able to get in that way by downloading it all PDFs onto a CD, but please understand that that's the lowest possible use of the CD, but it is a way to get in the door. Anytime you take digital media and just turn it into an analog of printed media, you're saving some money, but you're wasting a resource. If you turn it into a PDF, make it a searchable PDF. Put in links there to a society website. Put in links there to other articles on which it may have been based, where you have illustrations of something in the article. Have it where you have a hypertext link in there where you can click on it and immediately that variety pops up in a window where it's much enlarged and you can see exactly what that variety is and bring it back down and so on. Larry knows a whole lot more about those capabilities than I do, but any of these formats, digital formats, are capable of doing so much more than you can do with the printed word. And that's the kind of thing that we need to learn how to utilize and encourage, so that whatever it is you publish, in whatever format you publish, it can be anywhere in the world in an instant. And then we could have half a dozen people looking at your material, just as AAPE has an analysis for your title page and synopsis, or they'll give you an exhibit critique and so on. Not to say we couldn't get a group, whether it's through the writers unit, whether it's through CANAGE, whether it's through AAPE or whatever, where you could submit items for comment and assistance to help you maybe before you go into print with something, some ideas of, I'm not clear on this, you understand it very well, could you perhaps give me a little more background on it? I don't see what this variety is, can you bring that up, and so forth. This is what gives literature the opportunity, or publications the opportunity, to get on a par with exhibiting. If you put an exhibit out there, you may enter it in half a dozen different competitions. Well, no wonder we get so many golds. Whereas you've only got 3 competitions in literature, and once you published it, and it's frozen. Well, with the digital media, you can turn out a handbook, submit it in a digital format, and if there are problems with it, you can fix it. And the next volume comes out, it can be a whole lot better. Right now, there's a lot of discussion going on in the Classic Society of how their publications are going to occur in the future. And they've sort of dumped a lot of that stuff on Jim Lee. So I had some long conversations with him over the last couple of weeks about it. And he's going to propose that when they put out the Stamp Discover catalog, that they don't print it. And they don't even disseminate it in a format where it can be printed initially. where they offer it for a subscription basis for 1 year, where you can use it on the web, and you could submit all the corrections and emendations and everything else, sort of a beta version. And at the end of a year, you can pay another subscription fee, but at this point, all the corrections and changes have been in, and now you can download it in a format where you can print it out if you wish, or you can save it on your hard drive, whatever, and constantly keep it updated and constantly keep access to the changes by paying a subscription fee. Somebody new comes in and wants to start, they can pay the back fees of all the work that came along and then keep going from there. But a whole different way of disseminating information, but keeping it much more current, much more vital.
I didn't know that you could send a PDF that would be searchable, which is nice to know. I wonder if one of the judging categories could be on, like, digital innovation, something, it's like something new that somebody did on their digital publication that somehow furthered the hobby in some
Yeah, I mean,
interesting way.
when we entered our publications from the Collectors Club into IFLA, we got 3 large goals. And one of them got a special prize because the gentleman's exhibit was included in the book on a DVD. And that was given a special prize for innovation. Well, I'm sorry, that's been available for years, but they're just waking up to the fact. Okay? All of these things are doable. There was a book published, I mean, it's a doorstop, okay? And it was the Chronicle. Every word indexed. I mean, an amazing piece of work, except it was useless. Absolutely useless as printed text. You couldn't begin to find anything because it was so complexly organized. You had to go down 12 levels to find whatever it is you were looking for. But with it was a searchable DVD. Hell, I can recycle the book for paper. But that DVD is priceless. Whenever I want to find anything, that DVD, I type in 2 or 3 search words, and I've got the half a dozen articles that might apply, and you're there. I mean, it's a treasure. And these are the things that we need to look at. All of the stuff that we've struggled to put into printed format can be trivially easy when we get them into searchable PDFs, and who knows what the next iteration may be. But the nice thing is, once something is digitized, it migrates. You can take it to whatever the next format is, and you've always got some backwards compatibility built in. Yes?
I just want to sort of follow up on that about what we is older technology. I mean, I'm no longer on the cutting edge of technology. I was one. I have judged a number of CDs in literature competitions that are like exhibits, and they haven't been searchable, and they're very frustrated. And I would have no clue how to make a searchable PDF, except last November I'm up at the American Philatelic Research Library, and they have this nifty scanner. If you happen to want an article from them now and you want to pay, they'll scan it and email it to you. But you can scan things, and it's I don't know, I think I asked, it's maybe a $5,000 piece of equipment. I scan my exhibit, and they give me options of what I want to do before I scan it. And one of them is, how would you like this scanned? And one of the options was searchable PDF. I said, I clicked on that, scanned everything in, and then it churned away for about half an hour and created a PDF. And let me tell you, each page as it was scanned was multiple megabytes. When it was done, I had like 50 megabytes, and each page was like 20. I mean, don't ask me how it was compressed. Fully searchable. I didn't do anything but click a couple of buttons. I don't have to know how to do this. And that's what I want to say. You don't have to know how to do it. There's technology that will do it for you. All we need to know is that the technology exists and not keep burying our heads in the ground.
Hey Pat, that cover. Remember, you search the word?
Right.
So she had, let's say, like a too late marking on the cover, so she searches too late. It brings up where she referred to it in the text and even pulled up
The cover.
the cover's hand stamp.
If it can
That was just
recognize
so
something,
cool.
I just said, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know it existed, and that's, I think, one of the keys is we don't have to know how to do all this stuff. We just have to know that the technology exists to get it done and take advantage of it.
But we also have to know what is efficient. One of
Yeah.
the comments from John was,
Yeah.
I have, I don't know, was it 400 megabytes of PDFs?
Right.
There's 8,000 pages to our handbook. And he says, well, to make it easier, maybe you use one PDF. You can't do it. You don't have enough RAM in your machine. PDF isn't the answer for a lot of these things.
Well, yeah, there was another piece of literature I judged. Some author had done a very good handbook, as far as I could tell. He enlisted probably the help of his, in fact, I think it was his grandson, to create the CD or the DVD. The problem was, I'm sure his grandson had a computer that he played interactive video games on that had tons of memory and whatever, and not a single judge could open something. Because our equipment wasn't good enough. And that's something else we have to be aware of.
And the question is, what's the audience?
Yeah, what's
If
the
the audience
audience?
is your internet
Absolutely.
connected, because if you send a PDF on a CD that has a link to something online, which is why we didn't do that in ours, you're kind of cheating. If I'm going to do that, just go to my website.
Yeah.
You can go online, you should go to the real thing, you search it by Google, it's done the right thing. The other problem is with these websites is you can't judge them all the same. In the sense of the VSC, you can't, it has to be judged very differently from Vergara, or very similar because they're both forums, but they have to be judged differently from mine because mine's a newsletter.
Yeah.
And so one's more interactive, and we also have to be very technology savvy in the sense that, was it tested with all 3 browsers? Was it looked at for speed? I mean, I could come up with 100 pieces of criteria that we're going to want to know that
And that's an
your site is
article we
linked.
need from you.
We don't want to make it too complicated, but one thing I thought of having my website judged was I don't have album pages from AmeriStamps. So thinking of that it's going to be judged at some point, hopefully, I'm creating album pages now. I'm trying to preempt to know what should be the criteria for a member's site. If you're a topical club, you should have checklists, you should have this, you should have that. And so it's, the competition piece, it's going to make people write better websites.
Yes.
But we have all of this knowledge in our hobby right now. We just don't know how to access it.
Bingo, thank you.
Yes, and one of the